Hey y'all, it's R.W. Jones, the billionaire, and I want to show you how the government hijacks your community with your help. So they use three tools. Now, I'm going to preface that this is my opinion. However, it is a high level version of all the things that I have learned in government as a commissioner of a housing authority and as a employee of a planning department within a city. These are the tools that they deploy. Now, while they deploy many tools, at its highest level, 30,000-foot view, I'm going to give you three tools that they use, high level, that they use to deploy gentrification and all this other nonsense that we see here, all in the name of good governance. And they get you to co-sign and help out. So let's talk about it. The first rule of thumb, which is a capitalist principle or cycle, is called deprivation. Depreciation, starvation, whatever, depletion. They intentionally starve out a community to create new markets. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about starvation. Let's talk about deprivation, because y'all have seen those. It's the hoods that you got to lock your cars twice. Make sure you locked it the third time when you're driving through. But it's these communities here, which we like to call, some people might call it ghetto or hood or whatever you want to call it. But it is deprived of things that appreciate and value assets. And so we've seen these communities, they starve them out. Now, when we say they, who starves them out? Well, I just want you to know that when it comes to community planning, it's actually a design tool. And no ghetto or hood comes a hood by accident. It's intentional. It's engineering and policy engineering at its finest. Okay. They don't just, oh, one day, oh my God, it was thriving and now it's a hood. No, ma'am. No, sir. They are intentional. Okay. And so when I say they who starve it out, it's not your local governments necessarily, while they are absolutely a major player. Most fundings to the cities come from the state. Most funding to the state comes from the feds, right? And all monies from the feds come from where? Yep, Congress. Congress, Congress, Congress. So our House of Representatives, our senators, our House of Representatives and our senators are the ones that are appropriating these funds to the respective states. Now, they say the states decide, which is true. But the money still come from the feds. Now, states have their own monies too, through taxes and fees. However, I don't know a state that can survive without federal money. So when we talk in starvation and deprivation, when you talk about these hoods, these ghettos, these low crime riddled communities, okay, that look deplorable. Remember I said they were engineered. So you talk about a huge disinvestment. No money's coming in. So let's take public housing and Section 8 for an example, because public housing has had no investment to build its capital infrastructure for almost 50 years. None. And we're going to tell you towards the end how that was changed and how residents actually helped. So we do know that when you have these deplorable communities, you got all of these sick people in here. Now, while these people were starving it out, they starved, everybody broke, but somebody got to make money off the back of poor people. Like, that's the whole thing. And so, you got your infamous, you got your liquor stores, the infamous dollar stores. There's a market, ladies and gentlemen, for all of this. You have definitely your social services. You need your social services. You need your police force. You need your courts. Why? Because these people are going to commit crime. These people are going to need hospitals. So we're going to bring that here. And all these people are going to receive some kind of public housing, Section 8, food stamps, TANF, some kind of social welfare, some kind of WIC, some kind of something, right? So they're all going to come here to the Department of Social Services. And, the pain ain't cheap. So you got drugs. Let me put that here. You got crime. And ultimately, you got a whole underground network. And then you got an above ground whole entire business supply chain to feed the pain. So we got deprivation and how deprivation has its place. The goal is to starve out the market. Why? Because look at these hoods. That why we have focused on the people, I want you to look at the hoods in the back. Deplorable, because these people can't even maintain themselves, let alone maintain the communities that they live in. It's not going to happen, right? And so now that we have absolutely created a, how do I say, a pipeline for all of these sick people to go into these places, heavy government right here, heavy government, social services, police, courts, bailiffs, police officers, parole officers, correction officers, lawyers, appointed attorneys, the whole circuit is running right off of here. So while it has its place to keep the underground kind of sturdy, it still serves a whole nother different purpose. Number two, create new markets. Now we had all that deprivation, and now we want to create new markets. Again, a tool. What kind of new markets are we talking about? So one of the new markets, again, I'm talking public housing and I'm talking cities and municipalities specifically in this video, because I want to talk about one federal agency that has been complicit in creating all of this nonsense. So new markets, this is a public housing, right? PHA, public housing. So you have all of these hoods, and the program that they used is called, many of you probably have seen this. So while Congress failed to appropriate funding to HUD, which had this huge disinvestment in the infrastructure, which means there was no major reconstruction, redevelopment. It was just like patch and fix, patch and fix. But then the living conditions were and still is deplorable for more than probably half of those living in public housing. And so now that no money is coming in, then this program, this little fancy program called Rental Assistance Demonstration. Now, normally when they call it a demonstration, it really kind of means pilot. This is the first time we're doing it. We're just going to see, what sticks and how to make it like a real thing. But what's interesting to know about this tool is that prior to RAD, it was against the law for housing authorities to take out debt. They couldn't take equity out. They couldn't take debt out. Why? Because it was federally owned. Bad spelling. Federally owned, right? And so RAD comes in with this model and this promise to what they call deregulate. So now we have the old public housing, and then we have this new thing, which is hella complicated. It's actually taken this formula by how they funded these entities and turned it into what they call long-term Section 8 contracts. So it's taking a public housing formula, putting it into Section 8. Okay, whatever. And so these new markets here through this deregulation of RAD, which is actually a privatization. Because I'm going to show you here how RAD now says, hey, housing authorities, you can now take out debt. I want to say it's against the equity that they have. You could take out debt. Oops. You can now debt your equity. That means you're sitting on federal land. This is good land, and we're going to really kind of build this up, and there's going to be all this equity, and you can now take the debt out of that. Before it was against the law. So now it's not, because but now RAD comes in and says, hey, the government is not still giving you any money. Go to the private market and utilize it there. And so now RAD comes in and asks for private money to build public, federally owned housing. Now, this is where it gets tricky. And I promise you, on this big high level, there's so many things that happen in here, like the developers are actually able to get what they call soft loans. Okay, so when they go to the banks and the banks finance these deals, HUD pretty much backs them up. And in some cases, some of these developers get these soft loans. Like, what does a soft loan mean? Yeah, that part. That's exactly what it means. And so here we have now private developers owning what used to be called federal public housing. So yes, HUD is getting out of the public housing space. It no longer wants to manage public housing, and it is now rendering it to the private market. So when you have private market come in, what do you have? New rules, right? Let me get my notes. So there's new rules because you have this new mixed use credit, mixed use of the space as they redevelop it. So you have new landlords, you have new rules, and while the rules are supposed to stay the same for public housing, I can promise you, you'll have hundreds, if not thousands, of residents that will tell you otherwise. But then you have the private developers coming in with their private development teams, and in some cases, the actual housing authorities themselves are not even managing them anymore. In some cases, the housing authorities in themselves are getting kicked out and no longer managing these deals. So like some housing authorities feel like they got hijacked, but they're not going to tell nobody. Okay. So this whole shit show going on the top, residents falling out on the bottom. I'm just here to kind of give you, again, not just my personal opinion, just some things that I have learned that you can absolutely go and fact check. You're going to be digging a lot, but at the end of the day, you can see what I'm saying. You'll see it. You experience it. You are living it. And so with the new markets and public housing, RAD has absolutely come in and created, how do we say, opportunities for, here's your new markets. Excavation companies, moving, hauling, relocation, legal contracts. You got construction companies, architecture firms, engineers, all of these things. Private business, private enterprise, which, according to the Housing Act of 1949, is really the sole purpose that government is in place to help fuel business enterprise and that to help build our housing economy. However, the one thing I want you to think about, because while they'll sell us on, see, because they starved us out so bad here, because we got starved out so bad, they could literally buy you so cheap. And so when it's time for this new RAD development that came into the deal, into place, they can sell residents on this stuff that I'm talking to you about. No way. They didn't tell you this. This stuff don't even get mentioned ever. What they sold us on was you're going to get a new stove. You're going to get new countertops. You're going to get stainless steel appliances in some cases, new floors, new elevator. What do you want? A balcony? A patio? Oh, they let these little resident consultations be like this whole vision boarding process for residents who just got starved out. So now all residents see is I do not get to live like an animal anymore. And then they fix their eyes on this new development that's coming down the pipeline. So then they're able to hold on, manage expectations, hold on, continue living with the rats and the roaches. Hold on, because my new stove is on its way. Shame on these people. So we talked about the new markets, and this is nowhere near the payroll that exists on these development projects. Okay. So if we talked about creating the new markets, okay, we just took a hood and we're going to create some new markets. We starved it out. So now the next thing is, what's the third thing? So my third thing is justification for funding. And this, my ladies and gentlemen, it's where it gets really, really interesting. Justification for funding, because this entity right here, housing and urban development, oh boy, and it's so tricky. It's so tricky because you will never see it in plain sight. This is not something in plain sight. This is something you learn behind the scenes. This is something you learn in committee meetings or meetings, and you have to read and then ask questions. Because this is a work that is done and carried out by people with job descriptions who in their minds are doing the right thing because that's what their job is paying them for. But in essence, and it is actually, to me, I feel like it's defrauding the public, because the public should know that my tax dollars are being used to manipulate the pipelines of poor people or poor people in general. People should know that. Why? Because if you don't know this at its just at its bare bone, you would think that people that live here, that they actually want to live here. One, that this is their culture. Two, that this is how they function. Three, many of these people are more or just merely products of their environment. They literally have either nowhere else to go because this is the most affordable place that they can, afford. So you have moms, single dads, single moms raising children in these communities, deplorable communities. It only takes one straight bullet to bring some mom into a cycle of mental health, whether she has a broken heart, whether her mind leaves, a piece of her has been killed. How can she survive on a job when she's dealing with this? And you would think that they will be saturated with bereavement classes, mental health classes to help with the loss of a loved one. They don't. And so now there's this justification for funding because HUD specifically gives the funding out while HUD's, what do they call it? Their treasure box is loaded. And they have projects all across America and all kind of things, housing. There's two entities that I want to point out specifically because HUD, I'll go to this one. The goal is to take all of this sickness. Now, mind you, they do nothing with the people, right? So I'm just going to cross and just keep the people. Y'all just wait for the stove and the refrigerator. That's what you do. Because we're going to make this city a nice city. And you got to think, well, where is the sick people? Where they going? They're going to just move somewhere else, move out, get your voucher and go move out. No support somewhere rural maybe, which I'm an advocate for rural. But, it's not heavily dense with programs and things of that nature. So you might not want to move to rural if you have a serious mental health. But then I wouldn't suggest you stay in the hoods where you can get shot and or gunshots could be a trigger. So the goal is to take your hood, transform it into your community. But the way this works is cities. So I will say cities. You could say cities, municipalities, PHAs, which is public housing authorities. They get funded by this entity specifically to turn their ghettos, hoods, deplorable neighborhoods into thriving cities. So let's talk about that. Because here's my PHA, here's my city. The two of these have to work together. There is a crossroad, there is a commonality here. The city has what they call a comp plan. Sometimes it's the 2030 plan, whatever that plan is, a big old plan, a comprehensive plan that they took a whole analysis of the entire city. And the PHAs have a 5-year plan and an annual plan. In fact, anytime the housing authority is going to do any kind of grant, any kind of project, they have to come here, get some document that says our plans are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. Now, remember I told you that the comprehensive plan, the goal is to make these ghettos, this nice little city here. And so they only get the plan. You only get the money if you have these conditions. You only get the money if you have these conditions. So if you do not have low-income people, if you do not have poverty, you are not eligible for the funding. Now, this is where the justification for funding comes in because technically, only cities with low-income people who are burdened with affordable housing, who have high concentrations of poverty, receive these large grants from HUD, and the city gets what they call CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, large chunks of monies to, whether it could be for anything. And every city uses their CDBG dollars in a different manner. But this is where a lot of your shelters come from, your housing with people with AIDS, your facade grants, meaning any kind of redevelopment for seniors in your local area. So if you are a senior citizen and you have a home that you own, but you can't afford to make any kind of changes, more than likely your city has some type of a facade grant, and they may call it something else. They can call it a renovation grant or something like that. But the funds, you want to learn and know where is your city using its CDBG dollars to help cure this low income affordable housing issue. The housing authorities get capital funds, cap dollars, capital funds, and another type of fund I forgot. It's escaping my mind. But these both are these funded by HUD, and they have to have an agreement and a plan. So here's the problem I have. So the problem that I have is because I understand how this stuff works, how starvation, deprivation creates new markets, and how you starve a community, buy it out cheap, create these new markets, and all of a sudden, all of these big dogs come in and get all the pieces of the pie. Everybody got a development deal. Development deals come in and they do the job, leave, and then our broken people are sitting in their new homes with their shiny stoves and refrigerators. And then they're still not just broken, but broke at the same time because they weren't with their eyes on the prize. Again, you won't see it in plain sight because plain sight says, hey, we just redeveloped your whole entire community. You are now not living like a dog. So I want to show another trick for justification of funds that the city uses. Now they have many tools. Again, this would be a 2 to 3 day comprehensive training, 8 hours a day, and you will fall asleep because you're really not into it like that. Not everybody has the tenacity to look at regs and black and white and just be like, oh my God, what are they saying exactly? Not everybody has the heart, the tenacity, the capacity to follow the ball to the end when it gets lost in all of that black and white. But this is something that's important because this was a trick I learned when I worked in the city. So one of the tools that the city does, they'll do what they'll rezone, where whatever before, let's say in the 2000s, in order to fix your roof on your house, roof repairs, or any major repairs, you do know you have to go and get permits from the city. Well, in their deprivation era and stage, again, intentional engineered policy tools used for gentrification at its finest. Back in the day, you probably could do that. But because they just rezoned and they upfitted all the ordinances, now the parameters and or the specifics to your rehabbing, remodeling, redeveloping of your business. Let's say you had a storefront on a main corridor, they just upped it. So what could have cost you back then $20K to do a whole renovation can now run you anywhere. Well, the small business, a low income black business, that's how the black businesses get run out. They don't have $100K to make these changes. And so once the city officially rezones, upfits all the codes and ordinances, is now a whole nother different show. It's a whole different show where only the rich can play. The poor person cannot play this game. Again, a very dirty, grimy city tool. Now, you can upfit it, but if that's the case, use the CDBG funding and upfit and give them the support they need instead of running them out. It's wicked and it's unbearable. But this is one of the justifications for funding. This is one of the tools that the city uses is upfitting their zoning ordinances to a higher standard that cannot fit a small, maybe a mom and pop business like before. It's different. So this is how cities wind up looking different because they already said what the new specs are going to be. Big, big, boom, like major. And we don't, people on in layman's terms, regular people on the ground, we don't know this. We don't see this. We don't see this game. Or because we ain't even going to the meetings. Because I got too much going on in my life. I don't care. But this is where it's being done at. Right here. Right there. And the sad part is, I've seen people run for council. They don't even know. You could be running for city council. Half of this stuff I'm talking to you, they don't even know. So now you done ran for city council and you out there with all these people you done promised all of these things to. And you just like a show front. And so now the council members and the mayors and the city council, they just big show guys. The work is being done in the back by the staff. Not to mention, I swear I am actually blessed. I done worked in all the crevices. Worked in the General Assembly, where I seen why the representatives is in the front, it's the law clerks and the whole law committees in the back writing all the laws. Them reps ain't coming up with them laws. No, ma'am. No, sir. It's a whole law committee, whole clerk. The system is running in the back while the people in the front gonna change the game. That's why it don't matter who you voted in office. Since black people been free, it has not changed our experience because the system works behind the wall. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You go behind there, you're gonna see that same man. I don't care what city you go into, you're gonna see the same plays being played in every city. While the people in the front promise you all this stuff that they can never make happen. And this brings me to how it is all done with your help. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, we actually help push this. You know why? Because, let's come here. In order for the housing authority to get its funds every year, 5 year, every year, they have to have what they call resident consultation. They actually have to have a resident advisory board to actually agree with the plan. Now, the poor people. Because this is what the resident councils look like. You ain't there. Whoever you are watching this video, you ain't at the council. You didn't even know there was a council. Poor, bless their heart. They about 70, 80 years old. They can't, most of these people I have seen barely can read and write. Barely can do math. No tech skills whatsoever. Cannot even open an email. Look at her. Look at her. She's just so depressed. She just don't know. This one, like, what the hell are we doing? Why? Because now you done put this big old regulation, this whole annual plan and a plan in front of them, gave them 30 days. Let us know if you have any comments. Ma'am, sir, but I can't read. Many of the residents have English proficiency. Like there's a whole thing on English proficiency. Like they'll make you think that it has to do with if you just speak English because you may be from another country and you don't speak English. Like English is not your primary language. But what happens when you can't read or write? English proficiency is still at play because no one is asking the residents, can you read or write? And how many grown people will admit to being 100% illiterate? Nobody. You ain't reading it to them. You have no videos to show what's in the plan, how it's going to impact their life. So you come and you give your rhetoric. The housing authorities will come and give their rhetoric on what they want what they want the residents to know. And so the residents actually sign off. They have to have their John Hancock signature on the documentation. Now, in resident consultation, there is where the housing authority is supposed to provide comments that the residents have left, right? Okay. Same with the city. That's one thing that HUD will say. HUD is not going to get caught out there. They just not. They're just going to try not to get caught out there. Because the city also, when they do their comprehensive plan, any major changes to the comp plan, they got to go to the public. Anybody who receives HUD funding has to have public comments. Now, I've seen public comments, and I've seen them do nothing about it. But see, you got to know how to execute the right public comment, which we talk to you about that later when I as a housing hacker, because that's what we building, a army of housing hackers to hack this damn system and make this whole affordable housing thing a memory, meaning like enough is enough, the gig is up. But they too have to have residents sign on the dotted line that they have been presented with the plan. I'm sure in there it says they understand the plan, but no one gave them the adequate training. That's the question. Have you been trained on how to comprehend this plan? Have you, been provided adequate tools, infographics, videos? Do not put before a group of residents an actual book that in some cases that's 800 pages. Who reading 800 pages? I'm not even reading 800 pages. I'm going to skim it. I'm going to scan it just for the things I want to know. But I don't think none of them read 800. That executive director did not read 800 pages. I can promise you. That's not how that works. Everybody got a part. And they have lawyers that read that stuff, law clerks that read it and explain it. Give me the Cliff Notes. Give me the Cliff Notes. Write the Cliff Notes down. What's the major parts that I need to be concerned with as a representative, as somebody represent? What's the main components? That's how they read. But then they put it on you like, you're supposed to know all this stuff. So because residents are signing off on these agreements, and my question to you is, as a resident living in public housing and or Section 8, what are you signing on? What are you signing off on? Because at the end of the day, in order for this ghetto to become this major city, players that look like this guy get the money and you don't. When the question we should be asking, because all of this that I just talked to you about, all of it triggers Section 3. Section 3 is a law that basically says wherever certain HUD funds are awarded or spent to the greatest extent feasible, employment, training, contracting, and any other economic opportunities should be afforded to low-income residents, particularly those living in public housing or particularly those who receive housing subsidy. So with all of these funds, the city is obligated on their projects over $200,000, and in some cases $100,000. They're obligated to meet Section 3. Where your money at? Where your contracts? Where your training? Where your employment opportunities? However, if you are a single mom in public housing, you already know you're not about to give up no benefits like your TANF, SNAP, utilities, WIC, and housing rent to go up for no temporary job. But ain't nobody checking that. That's why your resident consultation, when you put in this resident consultation together, you should be talking about your RMC, your resident management corporation, and how the resident management corporation can be a partnership in the redevelopment deal and share in that equity. So that we live here. You don't get to come here and just build and then leave and we're still here with the same broken people. No, sir, no, ma'am. They should be talking about resident-owned businesses. Resident-owned businesses. How is resident-owned businesses going to get a piece of this pie? By adhering to Section 3. Talk to me about that. I want to know specifically the plans that you're going to take to ensure that in this development, not only do our resident-owned businesses get some contractual contracting opportunities, our RMCs, who else I got in here? I got home ownership. Section 8 home ownership. I want to find out what's the plan. Y'all just redevelop. Is any part of this redevelopment plan going to put some of the low-income families in housing within this city in a home using their voucher? If not, why? This is what the resident consultation should be dealing with. If y'all not bringing these kind of conversations to the table, then I don't know what y'all doing. Storefronts. So you mean to tell me that we're going to come in here, build on top of y'all, get the storefronts, give it to another business opportunity. Your business continues to struggle, but you ain't even negotiate that in the plan from the gate? Now, I get it. I get it. Now, here's the truth. While we can absolutely talk about resident management corporation, resident advisory boards, Section 3, home ownership for Section 8, storefronts, the whole 9 yards, because it's all available, statutorily written for residents. Now, you could talk about it, and they'll put your comment right down, and then still do their plan, because that has happened to many residents who have had this and amassed this information through various trainings. However, I want to show you how. You don't just write the plan. You don't just write this stuff. You got to now take action to execute to make sure that when the plan comes to play, so does your moves. Now your moves come into play. Because I'm not just taking that you're going to just do what I ask. Because I might have asked for a tall order. I might have asked for something that you ain't never planned for. But just like you could put that big development fee in the line item and your architectural fee in the line item, listen, put their fee, put the residence fee in the line item. Get your line item, ladies and gentlemen. But there's a way you have to do it. So if you haven't done so now, I want you to go and click and check out Hacking Housing Live. Hacking Housing Live. Actually, there's a button somewhere on here that's going to bring you to a on-demand video where I want to invite you into our community where you can join housing hackers from across the nation to learn of these things step by step so that you can start to execute and implement strategies in your community that not only allow you to come up, but allow everybody else in your community to come up too. Like, that's the plan. Let's get it.